Welcome to the Price and Value Journey, the podcast where we as professional service providers explore the value we deliver to clients, how to price that value, and position our work, all through the lens of what I call the generosity mindset. I'm your host, John Ray. Recently, I was invited as a guest on the Organization Conversation podcast hosted by Richard Grove. Richard is the Chief Operating Officer of Wall Control, which is sponsor of Organization Conversation. And Richard is also a small business advisor. Wall Control is a fascinating company. They're a family-owned and operated business that produces not only a high-quality American-made storage system product, but they do it all under their own roof in Tucker, Georgia. And they manufacture the best wall-mounted storage system available today. I was honored to be asked by Richard to come on his show and talk about my book, The Generosity Mindset. Here's our conversation.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Organization Conversation podcast radio show. We teased this on the last episode, the 50th episode, but we're going to talk with someone you guys know pretty well if you've listened to our podcast, and that is John Ray. John is the host of the show, or the producer of the show through Business RadioX, an extensive history in business and consulting. Spent the last 4 decades as a Wall Street analyst, an investment banker, investment manager, business consultant, multiple Business RadioX locations. So really an impressive resume, John. And a huge part of our success with this podcast has been because of you. I mean, it wouldn't be what it is without you for sure. So wanted to have you on because, in very exciting news, John has just published his book, The Generosity Mindset, and it's fantastic. You can get it on Amazon, on his website. I'll let you go here in a second, but yeah, I think for starters, give our audience a little bit more background on you. Again, they know you as the producer of the Wall Control podcast, but let them know who you are and your history and what led you to write this book.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Thanks for having me.
No, absolutely.
I really appreciate your willingness to do that. So as you say, I've been a business advisor for a long time. And when I started my own business, I got tired of corporate, started my own business advisory company, mostly aimed at small to mid-sized businesses several years ago. I had a problem that a lot of my peers have, and that problem was how to price your services. Here's the thing, just the fact of the day for you, the last time I saw this statistic, the percentage of business schools that have one course on pricing is less than 10%.
That's ridiculous.
Of course it is.
Your price, it might not be the most important thing, but that's up there on things you need to consider and be good at dialing in.
Exactly.
No matter what you do.
Exactly. And so that little factoid tells you, even if you didn't go to business school, however you started your business, there's just not a lot of resources out there that help you with that very important, as you say, aspect of your business. There's a whole lot of resources around marketing and operations and whatnot, just not a lot about pricing. And so I think people walk around in the dark when it comes to how to price, and they look at each other, and if your competition's price is wrong, then by definition, you're going to be wrong looking at their price.
I can for sure say, it's from my vantage point, that's absolutely true. You weight that criteria way too much based on what I've learned from you.
Yeah. So that's really how I got passionate about it, was my own journey and seeing this in clients. And so I decided to really get more educated about it, and eventually it led to its own specialty for me. And now here's a book.
Yeah. So I got to ask too, I know you considered a lot of different titles. The Generosity Mindset, like that when you hear it, you don't think this is about pricing. You know? So what inspired you to title your book the generosity mindset. And can you speak a little bit to the thought process and the definition of that for you?
It's completely counterintuitive, and it's really meant to be. But let's talk about what it's not. The big thing that it's not, it does not mean you're giving anything away. As a matter of fact, since you've read the book, I specifically say do not discount.
Mm-hmm.
That
absolutely.
Underline in italics and bold, do not discount. So it's not about giving anything away. Mm-hmm. What it's about is putting yourself in what I call a generous frame of mind when it comes to putting yourself in the shoes, in the mind, on the journey of your client.
And that's what I took. Yeah. Just framing, because I'll let you speak to, but it's like everybody thinks about themselves and their service and am I doing it right? And you talk about imposter syndrome, and you can go into as much. I don't want to read the book to people, but it's like, there's all these different things that are all introspective, but when you put yourself in the customer and the client's seat and put it in that vantage point, it's a lot easier to speak to, what they might need and to bring that value.
Let's maybe use an example. So I mentioned this story in the book. I was in front of a business advisory client. This guy had me out to his place, and we were in this conversation, and the more he talked, the more I was wondering, why am I here? Like, this guy has no problems, right? You would think that he was running Microsoft or something, the way he was talking about his business.
Yeah.
But I had been referred into him because he had problems.
Yeah.
But he was going on, and then his wife walks in, and she says, "Who are you?" And I told her who I was, and she says, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for being here. We need you so badly. This is going on. We don't know what our business is worth. We don't know what our books are a mess. We don't know what we're making month to month." She went on. And of course, this guy's over here in his chair behind the desk getting smaller and smaller as she goes on. And here's what this reveals is that every buyer of every product or service, they have really, why they're interested in a product or service really falls into two buckets: the tangible reason and the intangible reason. Mm-hmm. The tangible reason is, in my case, in that situation, it was the advisory services, right? The intangible reason was this man needed happiness in his marriage. Right.
That's exactly, it's such a good point. And I think about this too. It's like, there's what people say they need. Yeah. You need to check that box for sure. But what do they really want? What do you want? And it's like that, it really gets down to it. That's the truth.
Yeah. And so if I had just come away from that conversation thinking about how to value and price my advisory services, that I would have come up with a much different answer than if I had, fortunately, truth blew into the room when his wife came in and revealed an intangible that, if he could solve, was really priceless, right? And so the point is that intangible value is something, unless we as service providers, unless we find out what that is, ask the questions to find out what those intangibles are, then we can't fully price relative to what the true value that client sees in our service or product.
Right. And let's dig into that a little deeper too. There's a really good graphic in your book about the value that you provide to your client, what that's worth to them, and how that isn't associated with your quote cost of goods sold. Like people price, especially going back to the previous episode, we have steel costs and you want to mark it up, blah, 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 whatever that is. But it's like a 4-part thing, not a 2-part thing. It's not cost of goods sold markup. There's the price. It's what's the value to the customer or to the client.
Yes.
And I guess, how do you get a feel for that? And is there any actionable things you could give advice to someone on how they might start again, if you read the book and you see the graphic, it's going to make a lot more sense, but can you speak to that visual and how someone might go about considering that when they're trying to determine price for a client?
Yeah, for sure. Things there. Let's talk about the issue of cost. Your customers do not know what your costs are. And the truth of the matter is they don't care. Now, it doesn't mean they don't care about you or they don't care about your business. They want your business to succeed, but they don't really care what the cost is. What they're thinking, like human beings think from their own perspective. So they're looking at the value that they're getting out of the product or service. And that value, as we talked earlier, that value has two components. It has the tangible and it has the intangible. And customers will not buy unless they see the total value they're going to receive is in excess of the price they pay. And everyone has a different idea of value. And this is true for all products, all services. It's that simple. You've got to understand where your clients see value, and that's how they're going to determine whether they're going to buy or sell. It's also going to determine things like, are they going to accept your price increase? So if they see tremendous value in what you're offering, they'll have no problem accepting a price increase, right? So it's understanding that piece of it.
Yeah.
And the second part of your question.
Basically just helping, I guess it bleeds into another question, which is, what obstacles do you see someone encountering when they're trying to determine this? You speak a lot in the book about, like we're saying, looking internal and second guessing yourself, imposter syndrome, comparison, all these different mechanisms. What do you see being the main ones with the clients you work with, and how do you coach people on overcoming these things? What's some good practices and tidbits? Again, everybody needs to go read the book. But here's a little bit of actionable items. And I'll say this too, just as a tangent, like this is why we wanted you to come on the podcast, John, because our audience, very entrepreneurial, a lot of people run their own businesses, and we want to bring value to our audience. And these conversations are ones we have when mics are off. Yeah. So I want people to be able to hear and get some of the coaching that I get.
Thank you. Thank you. So one of my points of the book is that when you are an entrepreneur, particularly when you're a services entrepreneur and your factory floor is between your ears, as it were, right?
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that wording in the book.
Yeah. But even if you're the maker of a product, which is a piece of art, and I'm going to come back to that analogy here in a little bit, you have sometimes the mindsets that you have, whether they're positive or negative, can control how you view the value of what you sell, and therefore the product or the price of that product or service. And we have a lot of mindsets as entrepreneurs that hold us back. And I talk about them in the book. One of them is imposter syndrome, that hey, I am just playing a role and hopefully nobody figure out who I really am, right? Yeah. There's the mindset of inadequacy, which is slightly different. It's I don't have enough in myself to do what I'm doing here. I've gotten in this business and I'm just not good enough. There's the mindset of helping. I just want to help everyone, right? You might call it the Mother Teresa syndrome. Yeah. There's the mindset of scarcity, that there's not enough business to go around. It's a limited pie of opportunity out there. And I don't know how I've got to take a bite out of someone else in order to,
it's not a zero-sum game type situation. Yeah,
exactly. So there are a lot of these mindsets that hold us back. And so what my point in the book is that the way to get out of those mindsets is to lean into the value of what our clients see in us. And because clients see both a value that's tangible, they see that value, and we see that value, right? What we don't often see, because we don't ask, is the intangible. Exactly. The guy's wife that blows into the room, right, and tells the truth.
Yeah. And in my opinion, what they really want.
What they really want.
And they might not even know that's what they really want. But you're like taking the symptoms and you can see it before they do.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so I guess one of the big points in the book for me is that our clients see more value when you add these things up, tangible and intangible. They see more value in us than we see ourselves. So let's get out of our own head and lean into that value that clients see in us. And the only way we're going to know that is if we're in a dialogue it's a value conversation, and that's not a term I invented. That's been around a long time. We have value conversations with clients, but I would take it one step further and just say value dialogue. They were always talking to our clients about where they see value, and now that they have the product or service, like what's happened that they didn't expect, and to be asking those questions as a regular way of doing business. And if we do that and get a better sense of the priceless value that comes from those intangibles, we can lean into that.
Yeah.
And we can dispense with these little mindsets that hold us back.
Yeah. And that, to the point of, even if you're listening and you're not entrepreneurial or don't run your business, this is personal self-development stuff too. Like that, like everything you spoke to, inadequacy, imposter syndrome, scarcity, all these things are people think about themselves, whether they're on like a weight loss journey or nervous meeting new people. Like, these are all things you can take that aren't just pricing a service, but like putting a value on yourself. That's not a number and something you're selling. Just this is what I'm worth kind of thing. And really good ways to develop conversations and relationships outside of the superficial, but like digging down that, peeling the onion back and getting a layer or two deeper. So, fantastic stuff. So going back to talking with the customer, the client, what's the process of conducting this sort of a conversation? Because there's certain discomfort, and it can be unfamiliar, awkward maybe. You can't tell the guy, hey, looks like your wife's all over you. Want me to help you with that? That's what the guy needs.
Right.
So like, how do you go about that conversation? And the other thing too, I'll say, is you're really good at your personality and the way you interact with people. I can see you just knocking this out of the park, but how would you coach someone who's not quite as confident and doesn't have 4 decades worth of experience in these situations?
That's a great question. Part of it is, and I want to encourage the introverts out there.
Yeah.
Let's encourage them, because the truth of the matter is they may be better at this than those of us that lean extrovert.
Yeah.
So because the introverts are willing to, because of the way their personality leans, they're much more apt to hush and listen.
That's true.
And closing your mouth and using both ears is the best way to get to some of this stuff. But hey, the metaphorical wife does not always blow into the room and just give you the truth. And so what I advocate is, when you start a conversation with a client, is let's frame it around value, and to say, hey, I'm here to serve your needs, whatever they are. And I may not be the best provider, and there may be some needs you have that you don't think I can solve, but you're not going to necessarily bring them up because you don't think I can. But maybe I can, maybe I can't. But let's talk about all your needs. Let's not just talk about the ones that you called me about.
Yeah. Get off the statement of work a little bit.
Yes.
And
let's just have a conversation about where you are. Right. And let's also agree that if we get to a point where we're going to talk about doing business with each other, that the value you receive has to exceed the price you're going to pay. Everybody's going to agree to that, right?
Yeah, that's a really good one.
And so what that does is that yes to that question opens up a conversation about broader and deeper issues than just the reason someone called you. Mm-hmm. The services, quote unquote, that you're going to provide them, that they think you're going to provide them. It opens up a bigger conversation. And what it allows is you to serve them better, because you're going to get to what some of those needs and goals are. And it also is going to help you ultimately price your service better. Mm-hmm. And that's a value conversation. Mm-hmm. And what I contend is your ability to price depends on your patience and your ability to sit and talk with a client and have a good value conversation. If you're unwilling to do that, it's going to be hard to price your services adequately.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That almost answers my next question of the challenge of differentiating yourself in the professional services market, like how you go about doing that. And that alone it seems like a huge differentiator. I mean, that if you're doing that, you're probably in the top 10% of service providers. And when you talk the generosity mindset, like when you think about that, to say service provider belittles what you do. That's how much value you provide, because you're beyond that. So is there any other tidbits, or not tips or tricks, but things you found in the past that have helped you differentiate yourself in what can be a crowded space in these different areas of professional services? And even like for guys like me selling widgets, like how do you go about differentiating?
Yeah. So I think part of it is the willingness to have a conversation. In services, I'll just speak to that for a second. In services, you've got a ton of smart people out there, and you've got them in products too. But what did we all learn as we came through school? We all learned that we had to have the right answer. And so what we're taught from the very beginning is that we're supposed to have the answer, and we're supposed to spit it out and spit it out quick. And that is antithetical to what we're talking about here. Is what's more important in talking with a client is to have the right question or questions, and to start there and not assume you've got the answer. And I think when a service provider has not only all this schooling, as it were, right? Gone to college, maybe has a master's, has a lot of certifications and whatnot, they're trained to have answers. But where the magic is here is to really ask the right question before you start giving those answers. Because again, if you start giving answers before you get all the facts and before you get to where the intangibles are, you've gone down the wrong road.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. That's gold advice for sure. That's great guidance. So to drill down to get maybe less theoretical and more into like how you go about pricing or how you advise on it. You've asked the questions, you've developed a rapport and relationship, you know where they're at. And I guess every service is going to be different, but what process do you go through that other people could learn from for actually setting that price? Are you looking at the time you think you'll spend times some multiple? Are you looking at like, what do you advise and how do you coach on how to start to actually say, to come up with a number? Here's the number for XYZ, whatever it's going to be at time or retainer or whatever.
So my contention is if you price by the hour, you're pricing too low automatically.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't care what business you're in, automatically, because here's why. Because pricing by time or materials for that matter, those are inputs. Went to my contractor and said, I want you to build a deck on the back of my house. And they quote me the price of nails. I mean, that's not a price. And it really doesn't have anything to do with the value that I see in my new deck, which by the way, I see a whole lot of value in that deck, right? Being able to sit out there in that screened in porch on nice weather.
Yeah.
That's really what you've got to get to. Is once you have that conversation, is what I advocate is getting to where you're delivering options.
Okay. Yeah. And I saw that in the book. That's good, better, best.
Good, better, best options. Good is your basic offering, your very basic offering. Better is good with a little more features and benefits, and best is your premium velvet rope raving fan option that someone who loves you to death and will pay almost any price to get the full experience of Richard Grove or John Ray or whoever.
You get my cell phone number. I'll call you back. And exactly.
24/7.
Yeah.
I'll come bail you out of jail on Sunday morning at 3 in the morning, whatever,
that's
right?
The platinum.
That's right. So options are magic. When you give a customer options, they love options.
That's really good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that really works across a panoply of services. And it works in products too.
Because you let them pick.
Yes.
You didn't tell them anything. They chose it.
Chose it.
And that's not even that little subtlety of them, the subconsciousness of them picking it. That's huge.
It's huge. And what that also does is when you present those options, then it invites a further conversation around value, because you may have missed some value pieces there that you should have had a conversation about that maybe you didn't know, or maybe you were impatient. And a client looks at those engagement options and they say, something's missing here. Or, hey, I'd really like to have this little piece that you have in your, let's say, best. Can I get it over here in better? And then you have a conversation around that. And that's engagement that's leading to a new customer.
Absolutely.
And so that's a good thing.
Yeah. And they've invested their time in considering what they really want too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the key here is magic numbers 3. And the world is full of this. So just think about going to, let's say, Wendy's. So they've got a value menu. They've got their single and double hamburgers that they're traditionally known for, right? And then they've got whatever fancy burger on a pretzel bun or whatever they're advertising, right? That's their like premium option. Everyone has this. So this is true in products. It's true in services. It's something easy for the customer to understand.
Yeah, you see it too on like the SaaS platforms where it's like this many seats, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, so for sure.
Yes. So what this does, well, before we get to what this does for the client, let's think about the service provider that does not offer options. What are they normally are doing? Is they're giving everyone the best service they can give, and usually it's probably for the good price. And so you're giving away services that a lot of your customers don't even value.
You're right, yeah.
Let's differentiate. Let's differentiate between... And again, there's nothing wrong with this, because we all have different views of services, and your clients are no different. And give the client that wants just the basic option, just give that to them. Price it accordingly, but give that to them, and don't give them more. Right? Give them exactly what they want at that price, and then the same for better and the same for best. If you do that as a service provider, what you'll find that happens is that most of your clients, if you've done this right, broken down your services that way, they'll pick the middle option. They'll pick the middle option because there's something in psychology called a centrality preference. And people don't want to be too cheap, and they don't want to overspend, quote unquote.
My grandpa used to say, I don't deserve the best, but I need better than the worst, or something.
There you go.
Something along those lines.
That's the centrality preference in action right there.
Yeah.
And so what you will have, if you just introduce options into your business, that alone will help your pricing.
Yeah.
Because you're pricing higher and you're matching clients. Their needs with your offering.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because, most people, especially if you're enterprising and going out wanting to help people, you're going to give them the premium platinum version for whatever your price is.
That's right.
Because you're going to try to do your best.
That's right.
And that's what that implies. So on the flip side of it, we've already touched on one of them with pricing by the hour. What are some red flags of inadequate pricing with folks? Is that the biggest one, or are there some others that come to mind?
Several. Working too hard for too little money. If you think you're working too hard for too little money, you may have a pricing problem. In fact, you probably do. If you are selling to 80%, let's say 90% or more of the clients you sell to,
take the work.
Take the work.
That was a really good one.
Yeah. You have to have a healthy number of people that turn you down based on price.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because we're all cheapskates about something. I'm a cheapskate about coffee. Okay.
Yeah.
I would rather wait, and I'm not going to stop at Starbucks.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to stop at Racetrack. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to wait till I get to your office and let you buy me a cup of coffee. Right? So we all have this.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to know that at least probably 25% or a third of people out there are cheapskates about your product or service, whatever that is. And it's nothing personal about you.
No, I've heard the same thing. I forget what it was, like some billionaire that has some mega yacht but refuses to pay like $60 for a steak. It just won't do it. And there's just a crazy, that's the thing. And they're like, I can't do that.
It makes no sense to the rest of us.
Yeah.
But we all have those things.
Yeah.
So there's another red flag. Another one is not having options. So when you don't have options, you're by definition.
Yeah. You're giving too much for the price.
You're giving too much away. Pricing by the hour, we talked about. That's another one. Pricing by time. Pricing based on your cost. I've got a price based on a certain margin. Mm-hmm. You know what? Again, like we were talking about, your clients don't know your cost.
Yeah.
They know the value they hope to get out of it.
Yeah. And that is I hope people recognize that disassociation.
Yeah.
Like your price and your cost they don't need to be associated.
Yeah.
Which is obviously you need to cover your costs, but like it doesn't need to be a multiple of that or in a formulaic way of doing that. Yeah.
Right. Pricing based on the competition. It's real easy to think that I'll pick on the attorneys for example. If all the attorneys are at this price per hour, then that's where I need to be. You know what? You don't. Because it's simple. If everybody else is pricing by the hour and then hourly pricing is a red flag of inadequate pricing, then by definition, your price is wrong too.
You've groupthinked your way into nobody's got the right price or strategy.
Yep.
To that point, I had a question about, how important is it for service professionals to connect with each other in their network and have some sort of alignment there? What does that look like for you throughout your career? Friendly, hostile? I could see people that are in it that think that there's only so much business to go around, but how have you seen that over the years and as it continues to evolve? Just the professional service kind of network in general.
I'm a big believer in networking. I'm a big believer in, and I talk about this in the book, that when you give to the world, when you give to the universe, if you want me to get really airy-fairy about it.
Yeah, please do. I like that.
If you give to the universe, will give back to you. And here, to me, the fun part of living is you never know where that's going to come from. Mm-hmm. So the problem I think people have with networking and interacting with their peers in their industry is they think it's somehow like transactional. Mm-hmm. It's if I refer something to Richard, then I'm expecting something back, and I'm like comparing the two, and life does not work that way. Mm-hmm. The markets do not work that way. But if I'm known as a professional of value and my network knows that I'm looking out for them and I'm giving to them, and that giving does not have to be tangible. Remember, there's intangible value too. So if I'm giving intangible value to my network, that value is going to get returned to me. Mm-hmm. And the fun part of living is you never know where it's going to come from.
Yeah, that's a great, when you alluded to that a second ago, I was like, that's a really good takeaway. And that is the fun part of living, is not knowing who that call is or the impact you might have had and where that goes.
Yeah, so. It's just amazing to me. And I'm sure you've seen this because you live this way too. When you ask someone, like, why are you calling me? And then you hear of some person you haven't talked to in years that remembers something that you did for them way back when.
For sure.
And they're sending this person your way.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great, John. A couple more, just kind of high level, just book in general. So we've talked about the generosity mindset. I think people, and I'll say this too, it's definitely get in there, folks. It's a great book. We've talked about a lot of high level stuff, but he's even got Sheila's professional organizing business income statements in here. So if you want like nitty gritty detail, that's in here. It'll tell you the impact discounting 10% has, raising your price 15%, like literally what it does to your net margin, bottom line. Definitely get into the book. Is there anything else book specific that you'd like our audience to know about, or any interesting feedback you've gotten from early readers of it? Anything along those lines?
Sure. A couple things there. You mentioned the income statement. So one of the reasons I have those in there is I want people to see, and even if you're not into accounting, you could just see what the bottom line impact of what it puts to rest, hopefully, the notion that a lot of people have that cutting your prices is a good thing.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. Yeah. 10% discount doesn't sound like much until you see your net profit. And then you're like, whoa, okay.
Or your lack of net profit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's one of those things you visually just need to see it on an income statement.
Yeah.
And it's cool that you went into that level of detail in the book, and it's not just theoretical, higher like conversation. These are fantastic ways to live your life, but you can actually see, here it is. This is what it looks like.
Yeah, I think another thing in there that's really an outlier, maybe people might get the book and think, where did this come from? But it really has to do with this business that I have here at Business RadioX and helping professional services providers do a podcast. And what I found over time is it is the epitome of the generosity mindset in action, because what I have found in using a mic to deepen and initiate and deepen relationships that lead to revenue, as opposed to using that mic to talk about my thing, whatever my thing is, and just hope someone out there listening, just hope and pray that they're going to call me. Use a mic to celebrate others, right? And use it to build relationships I think it's magic for professional service providers. And that's why I'm passionate about it. That's why I own this other business that I have besides my business advisory practice.
And I'm appreciative of it. Yeah, I thought it was really cool you had that chapter in there about podcasting specific. It really helps tie all that together. That's fantastic, John. Is there anything else we haven't covered that you'd want a listener to know before they dive in themselves into the book?
No, I think it's okay to bring your insecurities and inadequacies here and just be honest about that. And here's the thing, Richard, I really got to a point in writing this book where I realized if I didn't really talk about that, then there was a big missing piece here.
Yeah. And I remember you going through the process.
Yeah.
I mean, you can speak to that too. Just thanks to you, because it is a lot of work to put a book like that together.
Right.
I can't even imagine.
Big thanks to my editor, Anita Henderson, who helped me with all this. But what I realized in writing the book was there are a lot of, I guess you might call them tips and tricks about how to have a value conversation and how to craft engagement options and so forth. But if you don't get your head around how to lean into the value clients receive from your services, if you don't get your head in that direction, then none of those things matter.
That's so well said. My background's in engineering, and I go back to thinking like, there's a difference between memorizing equations or knowing how to derive the equation from whatever the principle was. The first law of thermodynamics. Like once you can derive it, you don't have to memorize equations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're saying. Like you could give tips and tricks, and they can write those down and they get on a postcard, and it might be helpful, but you got to get them to feel what that root principle is, and then they can find their way. So,
absolutely. And here's the thing. If I'm convinced that if people really get into this and really immerse themselves in where their clients' heads are and where clients see value, they will not only dramatically change their business, but they will stand out, because this is counterintuitive, and it's so counterintuitive that a lot of people don't think that it's going to work, or it's too much, it's too hard. I have to have too long of a conversation. If you're willing to do this work, you will stand out just and when people that stand out as a professional of value, they can write their ticket.
Yeah. We'll wrap it up there, John. This has been fantastic. I know it's been valuable for me. I know for the audience. If you want to wrap us up, tell folks where they can find the book, how they can connect with you, and where they go for more.
Sure. My personal website is johnray.co, not com.co, johnray, johnray.co. You can also go to the generositymindset.com and get to the same place. And in terms of finding the book, you can find it as the proverbial saying goes, your favorite book retailer, whether that's mail order or your favorite bookstore, they can order the book for you. Just check it out there. And I've also got book resources on my website. So those are free to download and don't require your email address or anything. So you can check some of those out there.
Sounds good. Thanks again, John. Thanks for all you do for our podcast and for the community at large. It's been great talking with you, and really thankful that you wrote the book. It's been a great read, and I know our audience will appreciate it also.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to thank Richard again so much for having me on his show. We had a great conversation, and you can tell Richard knows his stuff given the questions that he asked. If you want to know more or get in touch with Richard, you can go to his website. Consultantsmallbusiness.com is where to go, and you can get more information on the small business consulting work that he does there. If you want to know more about Wall Control and their products, go to wallcontrol.com. You'll be glad you did. They do terrific work there at Wall Control. Thank you for joining me on the Price and Value Journey. If you found this episode helpful, please share it. And don't forget to subscribe to the show if you haven't already on your favorite podcast app. If you'd like to connect with me directly, you can email me at john@johnray.co. You can also learn more about my book, The Generosity Mindset, at thegenerositymindset.com. Thank you for joining me.